ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. In the previous lesson, we mentioned all the different views of scholars who tried to solve the issue when Imam Tirmidhi rahimahullah and others, they regard a narration with two contradictory terms, Ḥasan and Aṣ Ṣaḥīḥ, then what meaning do they imply? So now, to focus on the solutions which Ibn Hajar rahimahullah presents here. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah basically is claiming that there are one of two possibilities. Either a narration is transmitted with one chain of transmission, or it is related with many chains of transmission. So now why does he create this distinction? The reason is because he is taking this answer from Ibn Salah rahimahullah. And when Ibn Salah rahimahullah mentioned it, then scholars objected on Ibn Salah rahimahullah. So Ibn Salah rahimahullah gave the same, so to say, solution. He said, وَجَوَابُهُ أَنَّ ذَلِكَ رَاجِعٌ إِلَى الْإِسْنَادِ فَإِذَا رَوَى الْحَدِيث الْوَاحِدِ بِإِسْنَادَيْن أَحَدُهُمَا إِسْنَادٌ حَسَنٌ وَالْآخَرُ إِسْنَادٌ صَحِيحٌ استقام أن يقال فيه إنه حديث حسن صحيح، أي إنه حسن بالنسبة إلى إسناد، صحيح بالنسبة إلى إسناد آخر. So he is giving this exact same answer which Ibn Hajar is copying here. But now Ibn Hajar is well aware that Ibn Daqiq al-Eid rahimahullah, for example, said, وأقول أما الأول فيرد عليه الأحاديث التي قيل فيها حديث حسن صحيح مع أنه ليس لها إلا مخرج واحد ووجه واحد. He mentions this in Al-Iqtirah في فن الاصطلاح. It's on page 198. It's actually right at the beginning of the kitab, but in this Dar al-Bashair al-Islamiyya print, the kitab only starts on page 185, and then there are a whole lot of footnotes. So that's how come the reference becomes page 198. Otherwise, probably if you have another print, it will be page 4 or 5, somewhere like there, because it's right in the starting of the kitab. So, Ibn Hajar rahmallah saw this answer of Ibn Salah rahmallah, then he saw the objections which are raised, and therefore, to save himself from those objections, he created a difference between those narrations which are transmitted with one chain of transmission and those which are narrated with many chains of transmission. So he mentions that if there is only one chain of transmission, then he offered the following interpretation. Also, the lesson today is with mobile data. Normally it's with Wi-Fi. So if it breaks up or anything, then you should let me know, because here if it's transmitted through one chain of transmission, this is the interpretation which he gives. He says, فَإِن جُمِعَا أي الصحيح والحسن في Now here, if you got the print of Sheikh Nuruddin Itr, you're going to see that he put في وصف واحد. So he made it like that. But if you have to go through Qada'ul Watr and Qada'ul Watr, you'll see there Alam al-Qani insists that it has to be fi wasfi wahidin. So not fi wasfin wahidin as a musuf sifat, rather as mudaf ilay. So fi wasfi wahidin. So nevertheless, if you're interested in that whole thing, then you can go check it up there in Qada'ul Watr, which is probably thus far my best commentary on Nuzha an-Naḍar. So he says that كقول الترمذي وغيره حديث حسن صحيح فللتردد الحاصل من المجتهد في الناقل. You can see that he's saying that the mujtahid. So here when he's saying the mujtahid, is referring to the scholar who is saying it. So if it's Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah who mentions it frequently, or like we said that Ali bin Madini rahmallah also would mention it, Imam Bukhari rahmallah also would mention it. So this mujtahid who is mentioned, because they were mujtahidun in the field of hadith. So he's saying فَلِتَرَدُّدِ الْحَاصِلِ مِنَ الْمُجْتَهِدِ فِي النَّاقِلِ. It's this mujtahid who has the doubt. أَلِ اجْتَمَعَتْ فِيهِ شُرُوطُ الصِّحَّةِ أَوْ قَصُرَ عَنْهَا. That this particular narrator, does he fulfill the conditions of sihha? Does he have that kind of excellent memory? أَوْ قَصُرَ عَنْهَا. Or is his memory slightly weak, which would mean that he does not fulfill the conditions of sahih, and therefore he will be regarded as, his narrations would be graded as hasan. So he says, وَهَذَا حَيْثُ يَحْصُلُ مِنْهُ التَّفَرُّدْ بِتِلْكَ الرِّوَايَةِ. See, that he's saying that this year, if it's only transmitted via one chain of transmission. Now he's commenting on this here, and he's saying, وَعُرِفَ بِهَذَا جَوَابُ مَنِ اسْتَشْكَلَ الْجَمْعَ بَيْنَ الْوَصْفَيْنِ. That here, this is the answer for those who have found it difficult to understand it. How can you have these two contradictory terms mentioned together? And then they would say that al-Hasan qasirun an as-Sahīḥ, that Hasan is inferior to Sahih. فَفِي الْجَمْعِ بَيْنَ الْوَصْفَيْنِ إِثْبَاتٌ لِذَلِكَ الْقُصُورِ وَنَفْيُهُ. By combining these two, you are basically bringing it down to the level of Hasan, and you are raising it to the status of Sahih. So it becomes contradictory. So he's saying, وَمُحَصَّلُ الْجَوَابِ أَنَّ تَرَدُّدَ أَئِمَّةِ الْحَدِيثِ. Now they, on top he mentioned, فَلِلتَّرَدُّدِ الْحَاصِلِ مِنَ الْمُجْتَهِدِ بِالنَّاقِلِ. And that's why when we were explaining it in the previous, on Thursday, then I told you that how does the mujtahid, what Ibn Hajar is meaning, that how would the mujtahid become doubtful, is because you will find that scholars, when they are grading this particular narrator, then they are using different terms. So he's saying that the scholars before this mujtahid, the scholars from who Imam Tirmidhi rahimahullah is taking, they would pass different verdicts on this narration. So اقتضى للمجتهد ألا يصفه بأحد الوصفين. So this here necessitated that now this mujtahid, he cannot now with conviction grade it or pass one of these two definitions on the rawi. So he says فيقال فيه حسن باعتبار وصفه عند قوم صحيح باعتبار وصفه عند قوم. He joins the two and he says that it's حسن صحيح, Hasan according to some scholars, Sahih according to other scholars. And then he says that وغاية ما فيه أنه حذف منه حرف التردد. He's saying that at most what you could say is that the word which would show the doubt has been محذوف, because لأن حقه أن يقول حسن أو صحيح, because it would have to be said حسن أو صحيح, that this particular narration could be Hasan, because there are some scholars who said that it's Hasan, or it could be Sahih. وهذا كما حذف حرف العطف من الذي بعده. So here when he's saying بعده, it refers to the following scenario which is going to mention. Now this here is very common in Arabic, that you drop off the harf atf. So بعده means when you drop off the waw. Here he's saying you drop off the word aw. So Mullah al-Qari gives the example. He says وحكى أبو زيد أكلت سمكا لبنا تمرا. That if a person has to utter a statement like this in Arabic, no one would say that his statement does not make sense, what he is saying is wrong. Rather, they would understand that he ate fish also, and milk and dates. So he's saying, and likewise, the word aw could have also been mahdhuf, and it's common in Arabic. Like if someone has to say akul samak wal laban, then if in response to that you say kul samakan labanan, it means aw labanan. So Mullah al-Qari then says وَذَلِكَ لِقِيَامِ قَرِينَةٍ دَالَّةٍ عَلَى أَنَّ الْمُرَادَ أَحَدُهُمَا. An example of this here from Ḥadīth is that in Sahih Muslim, there is that narration which comes from Munzir bin Jarir, where he narrates from his father, a lengthy Ḥadīth, and after that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam gave a khutbah, and in that it comes there, تَصَدَّقَ رَجُلٌ مِّن دِينَارِهِ مِن دِرْهَمِهِ مِن ثَوْبِهِ min sa'i burrihi, min sa'i tamarihi. So you can see that the harf at has been mahzuf. Then based on all of this here, Ibn Hajar then says وَعَلَى هَذَا فَمَا قِيلَ فِيهِ حَسَنٌ صَحِيحٌ دُونَ مَا قِيلَ فِيهِ صَحِيحٌ. That based on all of this, that you're saying that some scholars doubted, or some scholars passed such remarks on the narrator, which would mean that his narrations are Hasan, whereas others pass such remarks which would mean that his narrations are Sahih, and therefore the mujtahid has doubted. So he's saying that based on this whole thing, if a hadith has been graded as Hasanun Sahih, it would be more inferior to a narration which is graded as Sahih. Why? لأن الجزم أقوى من التردد. He's saying because when they say that the narration is Sahih, it means they are absolutely sure. Everyone agreed that this particular narration is Sahih. But when he says Hasanun Sahih, then it means there is doubt. So it becomes more inferior. So here you can see that Ibn Hajar rahmallah is suggesting that because scholars used different words to describe a particular narrator, there are two possibilities. The first is that the scholar himself doubts what verdict to pass, and this is understood from that whole section of Falit Taraddudil Hasil Minal Mujtahid. And then the second is where you say that they are merely, the scholar just wants to clarify to us, he wants to highlight for us the contradictory views. And for this here, he says, أَنَّ تَرَدُّدَ أَئِمَّةِ الْحَدِيثِ فِي حَالِ نَاقِلِهِ. We're saying that there are two views which, one of you guys' stuff is on. If you can just switch off your stuff, your mic. Okay, so it says that these two views is so I'm saying that these two views, that to say that either the mujtahid is the one who is doubting, or maybe the mujtahid knew what he wants to, or what's the ruling on the hadith, but he merely wants to highlight to us the contradictory views. So this we understand it from Allama Munawi rahmallah, what he mentions in Al-Yawaqit wa Durar. So he mentions there that وَمُحَصَّلُ الْجَوَابِ أَنَّ تَرَدُّدَ أئمة الحديث في حال ناقله بأن قال بعضهم صدوق مثلا وبعضهم يقول ثقة اقتضى للمجتهد ألا يصفه بأحد الوصفين. And then he says فيقال فيه حسن باعتبار وصفه عند قوم لأن راويه عندهم صدوق. So I told you get all these kind of words. No problem. So you say that you get all these kind of words. And then he says صحيح باعتبار وصفه عند قوم آخرين لأن راويه عندهم ثقة. Thereafter what he says فهؤلاء غير مترددين في صحته وأولئك مترددون فيها. That these scholars are not the ones who are doubting, rather the doubt was from there. And thereafter he says أو يكون ذلك بحسب تردد المجتهد بعينه في الراوي. Otherwise it means that the mujtahid himself was the one who is doubting. So from this entire text which we read, it either means that scholars before Imam Tirmidhi doubted, or it means that Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah himself is the one who is doubting. So here Ibn Hajar rahmallah presents this response, and it's in contrast to the many other responses which we presented in the last lesson. So now to determine how accurate this response will be, we need to inspect it further. That when paying more attention to it, we find that this response here is actually not valid at all. It is totally baseless, and it's based on numerous reasons. So the first reason is here, if you look, Allama Qasim bin Qutb Bukhari mentions that يرد على هذا ما إذا كان المتفرد جمع شروط الصحة عندهم. So that there are so many narrations where Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah, for example, would classify as Ḥasan and Aṣ Ṣaḥīḥ, but everybody agreed that this particular narrator is, if he has to narrate a hadith, his narration will be graded as Sahih because he has a full memory. So Ibn al-Hanbali rahmallah, he also mentions the same thing in Qaful Athar, وَأُرِدَ عَلَى الْأَوَّلِ وَقُولْ جَمْ بَيْنَهُمَا فِي فَرْدٍ قَدْ جَمَعَ شُرُوطَ الصَّحَّةِ بِالْإِتِّفَاقِ. So this means that there are so many narrators that everyone will know that their memories are good. Scholars unanimously accept that they had excellent memories. Yet Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah is saying that is grading their narrations as Ḥasan and Aṣ Ṣaḥīḥ. For example, a few pages earlier, if you remember, here on page 60, Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned how scholars would regard the following sanad as Aṣaḥu Ṣaḥīḥ. So the sanad is where you have Zuhri narrating from Salim, and then he's narrating from Ibn Umar. If you turn there to page 60, you'll see he mentioned it first. So it's implying that this here is the highest level. So no one can ever doubt that any of these narrators have a weak memory. Yet, if you open Sunan Tirmidhi, you will see Imam Tirmidhi narrated like this here. حدثنا قتيبة قال حدثنا الليث. Both of these are narrators of Bukhari and Muslim. In fact, this whole sanad here, this exact same sanad, you know, when we're talking of the shurut of Bukhari and Muslim, this here is a sanad which fulfill the conditions of Bukhari and Muslim. Qutayba, obviously Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim narrated from him, and they narrated this exact same sanad. So this here is a sanad which comes in Bukhari and Muslim. Imam Tirmidhi is saying حدثنا قتيبة قال حدثنا الليث عن ابن شهاب عن سالم عن أبيه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن بلالا يؤذن بالليل فكلوا واشربوا حتى تسمعوا تأذين ابن أم مكتوم. So I told you that this sanad comes in Bukhari and Muslim, but the more important point to highlight is that it's a sanad which was regarded as Aṣaḥu Ṣaḥīḥ. But after this narration, what did Imam Tirmidhi say? He said, Ḥadīث ibn Umar, Ḥadīثun Ḥasanun Ṣaḥīḥun. So you can see, now here, either Ibn Hajar will have to bring proof to show that some scholars have graded this narration as Hasan, or any one of these narrators that they said is Saduq. But obviously that's not the case, because all scholars agree that each one of these narrators are authentic, and every one of them have very good memories. In fact, there are narrations which come and which are transmitted via silsilatul dhahab. So this year, silsilatul dhahab, the most senior teacher of Imam Tirmidhi, the mentor of Imam Tirmidhi, Imam Bukhari rahmallah, he regarded that as Aṣ Ṣaḥīḥ. Yet Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah, he would remark even on those kind of asanid, he would say Ḥasan and Aṣ Ṣaḥīḥ. So to give you one example, Imam Tirmidhi says that أنبأنا قتيبة, I just told you now that Qutayba is a narrator of Bukhari and Muslim. قال أنبأنا مالك بن أنس عن نافع عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنه قال لعن رجل امرأته وفرق النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بينهما وألحق الولد بالأم. After this narration, Imam Tirmidhi said that قال أبو عيسى هذا حديث حسن صحيح والعمل على هذا عند أهل العلم. So you can see it's narrated by a silsilatul dhahab. There's only one additional narrator, and that is Qutayba, who is also a narrator of Bukhari and Muslim. So in this way here, that if you have to look at this sanad here, Malik, an Nafi, an Ibn Umar, in fact, just looking at this sanad, you're overtaken with so much ru'b, with so much awe, that it's narrated with the most elite, the cream of the crop, that if anyone has to criticize any of these narrators, then the criticism will fall back on themselves. No one can ever doubt the memory of any of these narrators. Definitely, just seeing the sanad, you would know that it is an authentic sanad. Yet what Imam Tirmidhi is saying, Hadithun Ḥasan and Aṣ Ṣaḥīḥ. So it's definite that no one would have ever graded this here as a Hasan, because if you have to grade it as a Hasan, it would mean that someone has a weak memory. Now, like we said, that there are so many asanid which Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim rahimahumullah have narrated themselves. So it's not only fulfilling the conditions of Bukhari and Muslim, the whole hadith comes in Bukhari and Muslim. And just few pages back, what did Ibn Hajar rahimahullah tell us? He is the one who told us that the most authentic of all Sahih narrations are those narrations which are muttafaq alayh. Although we didn't accept it, but Ibn Hajar is the one who has this view that the most authentic of all narrations are those which are muttafaq alayh. Yet here he's trying to tell us that Imam Tirmidhi is firstly hesitant to call it even Sahih. And there were so many scholars who doubted, and there are others who even assumed that it's only Hasan. So this here will actually show us, it leads it to a contradiction, because there he's saying that it is the most, is the highest level of Sahih. Now he's saying, yeah, وَعَلَى هَذَا فَمَا قِيلَ فِيهِ حَسَنٌ صَحِيحٌ دُونَ مَا قِيلَ فِيهِ صَحِيحٌ لأن الجزم أقوى من التردد. So it shows that it's a contradiction. It actually becomes an evidence for us, this whole thing. It becomes an evidence for us against Ibn Hajar then. Because then we can tell Ibn Hajar rahmallah, if we have to accept that's what he's saying here, then we can tell him that our response, that the ahadith of Bukhari and Muslim, you remember firstly on page 52 it is, that he said that he gives the faida of an-Nadhar. So we can say here that you are saying that it's so strong, it's actually giving the faida of an-Nadhar, yet there are so many scholars who actually regarded these narrations as Hasan according to your own answer which you gave here. And if he is to say that it's the most authentic, then we can say that how are you calling it the most authentic when such a senior scholar like Imam Tirmidhi is hesitant to call it Sahih? That's why he's saying Hasanun Sahih is doubtful, and the reason for his doubt according to what you are saying is what أن تردد أئمة الحديث في حال ناقله, that scholars before also have doubted, and some scholars have graded the narrator as saduq. So all this here will then become a response again Ibn Hajar, and it will show a contradiction. So whilst we don't accept the whole taqsim sab'i to begin with, but we also don't have doubt that any of these stalwarts here, their memories was weak, so that their narrations will drop to Hasan. So in short, the crux of this whole thing is that Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah used both terms on the most authentic, not just on authentic, on the most authentic of narrations, whether you want to look at it from a sanad point of view, based on those who said Aṣ Ṣaḥīḥ, or whether you want to look at it from a kitab point of view, on what Ibn Hajar rahmallah said with regards to the most authentic, that the most authentic are those which are narrated in Bukhari and Muslim. So even then, Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah is remarked on most of those narrations also Hasanun Sahih. So we're saying that this year, saying that there are scholars in the past who graded it as Hasan, it's just an assumption. It's a conjecture. It's like there's no basis for it. So this here is already sufficient to prove how weak this answer which Ibn Hajar rahmallah is giving here, how weak it is and that it is incorrect. But to show you even more answers to the same thing here, there are more answers to give to it. The next answer which we could give, we say that Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah is a mujtahid. Like that, Imam Bukhari rahmallah is also a mujtahid. This answer is actually robbing them of the lofty status of being a mujtahid. Because if you're saying, firstly, Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, and you remember we spoke about Ali ibn al-Madini, that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah would say that I haven't felt myself inferior to any teacher like how I felt myself inferior to Ali bin Madini. So you can imagine what a great scholar he was, that Imam Bukhari would hold him in such high esteem. But you mean to say that they could not decide whether the narration is Ḥasan or Ṣaḥīḥ. That is why فَلِتَرَدُّدِ الْحَاصِلِ. So this here Mullah al-Qari says that وَفِيهِ أَنَّهُ يَلْزِمُ أَن يَكُونَ التِّرْمِذِي بَلِ الْبُخَارِ مُقَلِّدًا فِي التَّصْحِيحِ وَالتَّحْسِينِ. You're going to say that they are muqallids, that they themselves can't make up their mind. They have to follow others. So we think that it's really below the lofty status of these high-ranking scholars to assume that they would have doubt and they couldn't make up their mind. Because you must remember in Tirmidhi, it's so many narrations where Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah is saying Ḥasan and Aṣ Ṣaḥīḥ. So you mean that you mean to say that it's on so many narrations Imam Tirmidhi couldn't make up his mind? Then we say that the job of a mujtahid is not to tell his readers differences. Rather, what's the job of a mujtahid? So you know when you're doing iftar, then they say that it depends on the place. Now after Zuhr Salah, if a person missed the 4 rakats before Zuhr, for example, now he comes and asks you, must I pray the 2 rakats first or the 4 rakats? So you don't tell him that in the Hanafi madhab there is difference. These scholars said it's not the mahal to mention. Rather, you just tell him what he must do. So like that, Imam Tirmidhi, he must just tell us whether the narration is Ḥasan or Ṣaḥīḥ. He doesn't have to tell us the difference. So, and then another thing which we can raise here is that between Ḥasan and Ṣaḥīḥ, okay, whilst there is a difference, but ultimately the ruling will be the same. So if Imam Tirmidhi really wanted to tell us the differences, then he should rather tell us those differences where it actually impacts the ruling. Like he should say Sahihun Da'if, that because there are so many hadiths like that, isn't when you do muqaran the muqarana between the mazahib, then you will find that some mazahib would regard a narration as sahih and others would regard it as da'if. So you should rather then point out those kind of difference, but not once in a kitab you will find him saying sahihun da'if, or you won't even finding him saying hasanun da'if, using the same thing to say that he dropped off the harful taraddud. So we say that why did you not explain the differences there, which obviously has a direct impact on the rulings of those narrations. Then another answer is that if we say that if such great scholars like these, like Ali bin Madini and Imam Bukhari and Imam Tirmidhi, if they could not decide on the ruling of a narration, then how could it be possible for scholars who have much less knowledge than them to now finally come and give you the final ruling? So obviously, because people would turn to Imam Bukhari and ask him on difficult narrations. So Imam Bukhari, he can't come and tell you that there's ikhtilaf. I don't know the answer. It's either Hasan or Ṣaḥīḥ. You must go and figure it out yourself. Rather, everybody knew that Imam Bukhari will go and dissect and will come and he will give us the final ruling. Then another answer is that when you go through Sunan Tirmidhi, you will find that when Imam Tirmidhi mentions differences, then he does it in detail and he also takes the names of the various scholars. Or those of you who done Tirmidhi, you know that. So now, we say that this answer here which Ibn Hajar rahmallah is giving, it doesn't correspond with the general methodology which Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah had in his kitab. That if he wants to tell you the difference, he would tell you the differences. And, at times he does do this here. Then we say that Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah had so much regard for Imam Bukhari rahmallah, and he would ask Imam Bukhari rahmallah the ruling regarding so many narrations. Obviously, you would only ask him if he trusts him. You won't go ask a Shia what to a ruling on a particular thing because you don't trust him. So like that, you only ask someone who you trust. Okay, say maybe he asked him but he didn't trust him. Then you wouldn't have even quoted him. But so many places, Imam Tirmidhi actually quotes the response which Imam Bukhari rahmallah gives. Like if Imam Bukhari gave this response and it's the ultimate response, like he follows Imam Bukhari rahmallah. So we say that if he asked Imam Bukhari rahmallah with regards to so many narrations and he accepted the responses which Imam Bukhari rahmallah gave, then why did he not accept those narrations which Imam Bukhari rahmallah really regarded as sahih and actually put them in his kitab? Because Imam Bukhari selected and chose narrations for his sahih, for Al-Jami' al-Musnad al-Sahih, for his kitab Sahih al-Bukhari. So if Imam Tirmidhi had the doubt, he saw all his scholars in the past, something Hasan, something Sahih, but then the narration Imam Bukhari has accepted it as Sahih and he actually narrated in his kitab. So then Imam Tirmidhi, with the confidence which he shows for Imam Bukhari after other narrations, he should show the same confidence here, and he should also regard all these narrations as Sahih. So that again show us that that's what Ibn Hajar is saying here really does not make sense. And then another answer is that just like how he asked Imam Bukhari rahmallah with regards to so many other narrations. So how come he didn't ask Imam Bukhari rahmallah with regards to these narrations? Like if you have to picture it yourself, if you have to write a book, you are obviously going to first make research before you write. You're going to make sure you can present facts to your readers. You're not going to write a book and say, I doubt on this and I don't know this answer and I doubt on this. If Imam Tirmidhi is there, Imam Bukhari is with him, he can ask Imam Bukhari rahmallah. If he really has so much doubt, then he should have simply asked Imam Bukhari rahmallah. It's not becoming to obviously fill his book with those things which he doesn't know with certainty. The objective of writing the kitab was not to create more doubt that we don't know the ruling of this narration and we don't know the ruling of that narration. You go figure it out yourself. So that again shows us. Then another thing is that if Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah had a doubt and he couldn't solve whether the narration will be sahih or hasan, then why is it that no scholars who came after him? Obviously, if Imam Tirmidhi wrote this book here and is throwing it out there, so to say, that I don't know the answers, but that you figure it out. Obviously, at the first opportunities, another scholar would come. At least there are those narrations which are in Sahihain. They would come and say, okay, you don't know the response to this, but your teachers who you have so much regard for, they have said that these are Sahih narrations. All of that are solved already. Now let's look at those narrations which come with Asahul Asanid. Yeah, so all of these now we can take out the Hasanun and we can now say with certainty that they are Sahih. So it's obvious from all of these answers that Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah really did not have a doubt. So these are few answers to show that this view which Ibn Hajar rahmallah is saying here, it's weak. And we mentioned that the first answer was enough, but then there's also another answer which will be sufficient. And it actually applies to the next scenario, but it also fits in here. And the response to this, that becomes our eighth answer to give here, is we say that Ibn Hajar rahmallah, he mentions this answer here, but then he himself dismissed this answer. So if you see here that when he says وَهَذَا كَمَا حَذَفَ حَرْفُ الْعَطْفِ مِنَ الَّذِي بَعْدَهُمْ. So he's mentioning this here in Nuzha. But if you look at his nukat, then there he first quotes from someone else, and thereafter he brought objections on that quote. So we go through the full quote of his in nukat. There he mentions وَأَجَابَ بَعْضُ الْمُتَأَخِّرِينَ عَنْ أَصْلِ الْإِشْكَالِ. So he's mentioning that some have offered this response بأنه باعتبار الصدق الوصفين على الحديث بالنسبة إلى أحوال رواته عند أئمة الحديث، فإذا كان فيهم من يكون حديثه صحيحا عند قوم وحسنا عند قوم يقال فيه ذلك. But then Ibn Hajar is saying ويتعقب هذا بأنه لو أراد ذلك لأتى بالواو. If he really intended it, he would have brought the waw. So here he's saying that that وغاية ما فيه أنه حذف منه حرف التردد. But in his nukat, he's saying that why didn't he actually just mention the waw? So he would have said then hasanun wa sahihun, or he would have brought the word aw, and he would have said that hasanun aw sahihun. And then he says that ثم إن الذي يتبادر إلى الفهم أن الترمذي إنما يحكم على الحديث بالنسبة إلى ما عنده لا بالنسبة إلى غيره. Imam Tirmidhi, like we're saying, he's a mujtahid. Now picture it, Imam Tirmidhi in his time. All his students, scholars of the time actually are coming and asking him that if you picture yourself in the time of Imam Tirmidhi, you can imagine you have muhaddithun who would come to Imam Tirmidhi. Or understand it easier with Imam Bukhari, that you have senior Imam Muslim, after writing his whole kitab, goes to sit in the service of Imam Bukhari rahmallah. So you have muhaddithun who are asking Imam Bukhari. Imam Tirmidhi himself is mentioning so many places he asked Imam Bukhari. So it's very unbecoming to say that they would have had doubt and they wouldn't be able to know the response. فهذا يقدح في الجواب. And thereafter, Ibn Hajar mentions, لكن لو سلم هذا الجواب من التعقيب لكان أقرب إلى المراد من غيره وإني لأميل إليه وأرتضيه. He says that had there been answers to this, then it would have been the best answer. And he says that I am inclined towards it. And then he says, وَالْجَوَابُ عَمَّا يَرِدُ عَلَيْهِ مُمْكِنٌ. If you really want to, then all those different objections, you could respond to it. But nevertheless, he didn't respond to it. So you can see that from his own mouth, he is admitting that this particular answer which he gave is weak. So from all of these here, we can say we can see that the answer of Ibn Hajar rahmallah, just like how all the other views which we mentioned in the previous lesson are also weak. So in the same way, the answer here which Ibn Hajar rahmallah is giving is also weak. Inshallah, on Thursday we'll discuss if there is a solid answer with regards to this or not. Until then, Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.